Hello, I'm the ProperCuber, and today I will be explaining how to execute, recognize, and memorize the adjacent swap PLLs in the second of 3 parts in the PLL series. This is also part of my idea to make videos explaining algorithms, what they do, and how to execute them and memorize and recognize them. And I'm also going to put the algorithms and the triggers on screen. I'm doing this now because I forgot to add it in the last video. I had uploaded it to Google Drive so I could then upload it to my computer and then YouTube. However, I forgot to edit in the, well, not edit, but put in the algorithms with the triggers on screen because I wanted to clear some space off of the device I record on, and I was in a bit of a rush. So sorry for that, but it'll be in this video. And the algorithms I'll be covering is tperm, the gperms, jperms, aperms, fperms, and rperms. This isn't an rperm though. That's an rperm. So once again, tperm, gperms, jperms, aperms, fperm, and rperms. Let's get into the video. Let's start with tperm, and the algorithm is ru r prime u prime r prime f r2 u prime r prime u prime r u r prime f. The algorithm should be on screen with the triggers, and what it does is it swaps these two edges and these two corners. See how these two are now in different places, and this would go here and this would go here. And how I think of it is sexy move to start a sledge and doing R but going all the way up so that you can see the white. Moving this pair over this edge, moving it down, U again, then putting this back, moving this back down, and F again, and F prime. And one other way to memorize it is the triggers: sexy move, RF, R2 U prime, R prime, U prime, RU R prime, R F. And let's go to the next one. Okay, next is R perm. Here is R A perm. And here is R B perm. What the R perms do is swap these two edges and these two corners for R A perm. R B perm swaps these two and these two. Let's start with R A perm, and the algorithm is R U prime R prime U prime R U R D R prime U prime R D prime R prime U2 R prime. Recognition is rather simple. It can be recognized by headlights and a bar, but the headlights are not opposite colors like tperm, and that's how you can tell the difference from this and tperm when just looking at this face. I recommend memorizing this by triggers, and once again, the algorithm should be on screen with triggers. And how to memorize with triggers is by giving the trigger's name and thinking of the triggers as one single move to bring your move count from something like 14 down to 5 or 6 or 7, maybe even less. And I'm just going to quickly go over how I might visualize this. However, I do not recommend memorizing most of the PLLs with visualization other than, say, tperm or tperm, aperm, or the jperms. This one I memorize as taking out the pair and then doing a U move. Well, U prime move, and then moving this out of the way so you can put this and you'll set it up to pair it up. Then moving this up so this is in the down face. Demove, pairing it up and moving it out of the way. And then moving this back up so you can fix the D face. Moving this back down and this pair back, then moving that back. And now I'm just going to go into our B perm, which can be recognized by a checkerboard pattern from here down to here. See how this is green, orange, green, orange, green? And this can be other colors like blue and red, but I'm just gonna, for now, it's just gonna be green and orange. And I recommend memorizing this as the triggers. I do not really think you should visualize this one. The R A perm, you could visualize it, but for the R B perm, I do not recommend visualizing it and rather learning it from the triggers. I think of it as R2F, RU prime, R prime F, RU2, R prime U2, R. And to memorize the triggers, one example of giving them names is in the RB perm, where it's R2F, RU, RU prime, R prime F. And here is where one example. R, U2, R prime, U2. I think of this as U2 sexy move because you do U2s instead of U's and U primes. And that's all for R perms. Now let's just go to the next one. Next, I'll cover the A perms. Here is a B perm, and here is a perm. These algorithms are extremely similar, and this is one where I highly recommend not only learning the triggers, but also looking at the visualization of these permutations of the last layer. And that is because of the similarities. So I'm just going to first explain what the algorithms do. They swap these three corners or these three corners, and the execution for the algorithms is in this AA perm rotating down, in AB perm rotating up, L2 D2, and then moving this here without breaking up this. On this one, let me just show it to you again. It's L prime, U prime, L. However, on this one, let me show it to you again, is L, U, L prime. It's just the inverse of this one. And then you do D2 again, and put this back without disturbing this, and moving it back down. So, L, U prime, L, and the inverse, L prime, U, L prime. And first, let me just get into recognition. So this is a perm. It has a checkerboard pattern, orange, blue, or whatever colors. Then a bar here, or you can also recognize it by same colors and a bar here. And that means you rotate down and do L prime moves when moving this out and in. And this one, it has headlights here of non-opposite colors, so these colors can be next to each other, and then a bar here. And that's when you rotate a top and do L moves instead of L prime moves. I do not recommend learning the triggers for this and memorizing the visualization, except for the L2 D2 part and the D2s after that. But other than that, I recommend just focusing on what it does instead of the triggers because of the similarities and minor differences. Now let's go into the next one. Next is fperm. It swaps these two edges and these two corners. And you can recognize it by a full bar here and then no other bar on the rest of the cube. You hold it like this. Now, once again, it'll be on, the algorithm is on screen with the triggers. It'll also be in the description, and I'm just going to go into it quickly. R prime, U prime, F prime, R, U, R, U prime, R prime, F, R2, U prime, R prime, U prime, R, U, R prime, U, R. And let me just do that again, set it back up. To memorize it, think of it as R prime, as moving this, this, and this. So these three going in a counterclockwise order. So R prime, U prime, F prime. Sexy move. Then pairing up this with R prime and F. Then taking it back up, moving it away, moving this back up, and then inserting it by moving it down, back again, this up again, and this back. And I memorized the triggers, and here is the triggers that, here is it, but with the triggers, however, I don't remember what I named it. It's in my muscle memory now, so I don't really need to know the triggers. R prime, U prime, F, counterclockwise, rotating all of these counterclockwise, and then sexy move, R prime, F, R2, U prime, R prime, U prime, R, U, R prime, U, R. And that is fperm. It's rather simple PLO. And once again, recognition is by a bar in the front and no other bars. And then let's go to the next one. Now there are jperms. And these move these corners and these edges. This is JA perm, and this is JB perm. I'll go into recognition when I cover the algorithms, and to start, I'm gonna cover A perm. The algorithm is X, so putting the white face in front. R2, F, R, F prime, R, U2, R prime, U, R, U2. And it's recognized by a bar all along here. And I like to visualize this and not necessarily memorize the triggers. I recognize this as sledgehammer, except you're doing an R2 at the beginning. Then doing R, U2, R prime, U, which just pairs this up, which makes this into this case, U2, then puts it back, and then puts this up front, pairs it up, and U2. You can also memorize it by the triggers. And once again, I'll just cover the visualization quickly. Sledgehammer with an R2 at the beginning. Make this into this F2L case. U2, pair it back up, move this atop, and then put it back. And next there is JB perm. Let me just give me 1 second to do something quickly. And this one is practically T perm. However, you're moving one part of it ahead of it, and the algorithm is R, U, R prime, F prime. So you have that part. Then sexy move, R prime F, R2, U prime, R prime. This is recognized by a bar right here, and then another bar here. And you can think of it as the last part of T-perm, so let me just get T-perm up here. R T-perm is sexy move, R prime F, so R2U R prime, then U, and R U R prime F. So it's this R U R prime F, and then pretty much T-perm up to the insertion and nothing more. So that saved you one move, and it's practically the same as T-perm. I just memorize it as start of sexy move, but F prime at the end, then sexy move, then start of sledge with an R2 at the end, moving this in and back. Really similar to T-perm, just with the last part where you insert it back in the front. And now let's cover the G-perms. Finally, there are the G-perms, the worst PLLs to learn. These are not the worst PLLs. These are alright. They are not great by any means, but they aren't the worst. That title would go to them. NA perm if you do PLLs with the lefty versions, or NB if you do it with the right, like I do. And I'm just gonna start with GA perm, and I am not gonna show you how to visualize them, just the moves for them. And here is the algorithm: R2 U R prime U, R prime U prime R U prime, R2 U prime D, R prime U R D prime. And except for this one actually, it's alright to visualize, so I'm just going to do that quickly. R2, moving this pair here, taking it back down, moving this here, then moving it back down and moving it back. Then I think of it as R U prime R2, and then moving this over and moving this here, so that you have this pseudo pair into this slot. Once again, I'll quickly go into visualization of it. You have this block here, moving it up, out of the way, this down, moving it out more, and moving this back so that you preserve this pseudo pair, moving it up, then doing R2, moving this D face and this U face so you have this pseudo pair, moving it in, and aligning the D face again. The reverse of this is G C perm, but before I get into that, let me just do a quick thing on visualization. Sorry, I forgot to do that. And here you have headlights, not a checkerboard pattern like A perm, and then you have a bar here. And then you can just execute your algorithm. And then there's GC perm. I'm gonna go into recognition because this may look a lot like RB perm, but it's not. The difference is you don't have a checkerboard pattern. It's just headlights, and then it stops here. And the algorithm is R2 again, but going into reverse. So it's U prime, R, U prime, R, U, R prime, U, R2, U prime, D prime, U, D prime, R, U prime, R, and D. Once again, if I misspeak, I'll have the algorithms on screen and in the description. And I'm just going to go into GD perm. Just give me 1 second. This is GD perm, recognized by matching headlights and a bar here. So, well, not matching, but opposite headlights and a bar here. And this is important for GB perm, but I'll just do this one first. And how I think of it, well, the algorithm goes RU, R prime, U prime, D, R2, U prime, R, U prime, R prime, U, R prime, U, R2, D prime. So let me just show you how to memorize what I memorized for the triggers. And it's sexy move with D, R2, then U, R prime, U, then it's RU prime twice, and then R2 and aligning the D face again. And the other one is GB perm, which is recognized by opposite headlights and a bar here, unlike the A perm, which also has a bar here. However, the headlights are not matching. Well, not opposite colors, not, I don't mean matching, but opposite colors. And the algorithm is R prime, U prime, R, U, D prime, R2, U, R prime, U, R, U prime, R, U prime, R2, D. So the triggers and how I memorize this is back sexy move, then D at the same, D prime at the same time, R2, and then U, R prime, U, then it's R, U prime twice, R2, and aligning the D face again. And that is all for today's video. Thank you for watching. I hope you have a good day. As always, remember to wear a bike helmet when you go biking, so stuff like this will not happen to your head. And bye for now. One thing I forgot to mention. I forgot to mention how the G-perms, what the G-perms move. But I'm not going to mention that. And why is what I forgot to mention. I'm not going to mention that because looking at what it moves around is impractical, and it will worsen the experience of learning the G-perms. And if you want to know what the arrows look like, you can go to J-perms video on the PLL tier list. I was going to say jperm.net, but there he doesn't have the arrows because it's so impractical. How you recognize G-perms by the headlights. And once you get one look at, just look at the tier list down on the bottom, the choices, and look for the one that has a bunch of crazy arrows just going all over the cube. You'll know, and then you can see it'll be G-perm. And also, you can go to jperm.net for the algorithms, and there you can turn on triggers from the settings. I'm pretty sure I mentioned this before. I just wanted to mention it once again. And there you can also write it down and then name the triggers and use that to memorize them. And that's all for today's video. Once again, bye, and remember to wear a bike helmet.